Brad Pitt has been one of the most talked about stars in the world for decades. His movies, his relationships, and especially his divorce from Angelina Jolie have all been picked apart in the public eye. But through all the noise, one part of his life has always stayed quiet: his children. For years, people have wondered where they stand with their father, but none of them ever spoke publicly. That is, until now. One of Brad's sons has finally broken the silence, and what he revealed has left fans shocked, critics buzzing, and the internet scrambling for answers. So the real question is, what did Brad Pitt's son actually say? And why has it got everyone talking? Stick around, because we're diving into it. Brad and Angelina, the love story that shocked and shattered. Hollywood. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie weren't just another Hollywood couple. They were the headline, the kind of pairing that made people talk in grocery store aisles and kept paparazzi camping outside their gates. But the way their story began? It wasn't some fairy tale. It was messy, forbidden, and impossible to ignore. The year was 2003. Brad was still married to Jennifer Aniston, America's Golden Girl, while Angelina was a single mother just coming out of her own divorce from Billy Bob Thornton. Then came Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a film about two married assassins living double lives. On screen, the chemistry was undeniable, but off-screen, that spark was dangerous. Angelina later admitted it wasn't some thunderbolt of instant love. At first, it was about teamwork. The movie forced them into wild, over-the-top stunts and long days together. And somewhere in the middle of the chaos, friendship crept in. But as months went by, that friendship turned into something they couldn't quite ignore. At some point, Angelina remembered reaching a point where she couldn't wait to get to work, simply because she knew Brad would be there. Meanwhile, Brad's marriage to Aniston was crumbling. In January 2005, the couple announced their separation in a joint statement. They insisted their split wasn't about the tabloids or the rumors, but the timing of the divorce told a different story. By March, Jennifer filed for divorce, finalizing it that October. Suddenly, the perfect Hollywood marriage was over, and the rumors about Brad and Angelina got a whole lot louder. But while the world speculated about the true nature of their relationship, Angelina's family was already growing. She had adopted her first son, Maddox, in 2002. Then, in 2005, she adopted baby Zahara from Ethiopia, with Brad right there at her side. He wasn't just tagging along, he was stepping into the role of father. By early 2006, a judge approved the name change that made Maddox and Zahara officially Jolie Pitt. To the public, the message was clear. Brad wasn't on the sidelines anymore. He was all in. That same year, they welcomed their first biological child together, Shiloh, born in Namibia. The birth was treated like an international event, with photographers scrambling across the globe. Brad later said his adopted kids were no different to him than Shiloh. They were his blood in every way that mattered. And then came the moment Angelina swore sealed the deal. She recalled being on the floor of a hotel room with Brad and Maddox, playing with toy cars, when Maddox suddenly looked at Brad and called him Dad. They froze. No one said a word. They just looked at each other. That was it. That was the defining moment. They weren't just playing house anymore. They were a family. The family kept growing. In 2007, Angelina adopted Pax from Vietnam. By 2008, she was pregnant with twins, Knox and Vivienne. 6 kids in total. A French chateau worth millions, and a media circus that followed their every move. On the surface, it looked like a glamorous globe-trotting dream. But behind the glitz, the cracks were starting to show. Still, the public saw perfection. They launched Miraval wines from their French estate, made red carpet appearances that stole the show, and gave interviews about how they never spent more than 3 days apart. Their kids, though, weren't buying the casual act. They pushed their parents to make it official. Brad admitted the children kept asking why their friends' parents were married, and they weren't. Eventually, he gave in. "Get mommy a ring," the kids demanded. And he did. By 2012, they were engaged. By 2014, they finally said, "I do," in a private ceremony at their chateau, with just 20 guests. But the real stars of the wedding weren't Brad or Angelina. It was their kids. Maddox and Pax walked her down the aisle, Zahara and Vivian tossed flowers, and Shiloh and Knox carried the rings. Angelina's veil was covered in her children's drawings, and Pax even baked the wedding cake. It was a family affair from start to finish, and for a moment, it looked like the fairy tale ending had finally arrived. But the fairy tale was short-lived. Just 2 years later, everything came crashing down, and by 2016, Angelina filed for divorce. But fairy tales rarely last in Hollywood. Just 2 years later, everything came crashing down, and by 2016, Angelina filed for divorce. Yet to understand how Brangelina's love story unraveled so spectacularly, we have to go back to where it all began, when another golden couple was already on the verge of breaking. The affair that rocked Hollywood. Brad, Jen, and Angelina. Before Brangelina became the obsession of every tabloid, there was Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, the golden couple of Hollywood. They weren't just married, they were the poster kids for romance in the limelight. Their red carpet moments were flawless. Their magazine covers sold dreams, and to the outside world, it looked like they had it all. But behind that perfect picture, cracks were starting to show. And in 2005, those cracks finally split wide open. After 7 years together, Brad and Jen announced they were calling it quits. Their joint statement tried to keep things graceful, insisting it wasn't about tabloid speculation, and that they'd remain caring friends who still had love and admiration for each other. But the world wasn't buying it, because what made their breakup so fascinating wasn't just the split. It was Brad Pitt's honesty, something you almost never see in Hollywood. At the time, Pitt had just wrapped Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Angelina Jolie, and their chemistry on set was impossible to ignore. Rumors spread like wildfire that sparks had flown off camera too. Jennifer herself had even crossed paths with Jolie before filming began. It was 2004, and Aniston was on the Warner Brothers lot shooting Friends when she bumped into Jolie, who was preparing for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Jen later recalled in an interview how she stopped, introduced herself, and told Jolie that Brad was really looking forward to working with her. She even wished her a great time. Looking back, that simple encounter almost feels like foreshadowing, the kind of detail that makes the whole story sting a little more. By January 2005, the fairy tale marriage was officially over. Brad and Jen's separation was announced, and though Pitt swore there had been no physical affair while he was married, it was clear he had fallen for Jolie. The damage was done, and the marriage couldn't be saved. Even Courtney Cox, Jennifer's close friend and Friends co-star, shed light on the situation later. She admitted Brad had been upfront about his attraction to Angelina. Cox explained that while she didn't think things had gone physical, there was definitely a connection, and Brad had confessed it to Jen. Most people, she pointed out, would have kept something like that hidden. But Brad was honest, maybe brutally so. And while honesty didn't make the heartbreak any less painful, it was a rare glimpse of transparency in a world where celebrities usually do everything to protect their image. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about a love triangle. Insiders at the time suggested Brad and Jen's marriage had already been unraveling long before Angelina entered the picture. Aniston was navigating life after Friends ended in 2004, a massive career and personal transition. Meanwhile, Pitt was buried in work, emotionally checked out, and spending more and more time with Jolie. According to a source at People magazine, the couple had simply lost sight of themselves as individuals. Even with their glamorous lifestyle and everything money could buy, they weren't happy. Jen reportedly felt isolated, left behind emotionally. So, when Brad admitted to being drawn to Angelina, it wasn't the sole reason for the split. It was just the final straw. Not long after the divorce papers were signed, Brad and Angelina stepped out as a couple, confirming what the world had already guessed. Together, they built a family, traveled the world, and eventually tied the knot in 2014. For a while, they looked unstoppable. But fast forward to 2016, and their story ended in flames too, with one of the messiest divorces Hollywood has ever seen. As for Jennifer, she was unfairly cast as the heartbroken victim, with tabloids fueling a rivalry between her and Jolie that she never asked for. The media loved to paint her as poor Jen, but she refused to let that define her. A decade later, in 2015, she shut down the narrative once and for all. She told Entertainment Tonight that it was time to stop with the petty drama, calling it old and tiresome. Her exact words? Comparing it to an old leather shoe, worn out, boring, and long overdue for something new. But if Jennifer was ready to move on, Brad and Angelina were about to walk into the very storm she had escaped. What began as a passion-filled love story soon collapsed into one of Hollywood's longest and most bitter legal wars. The divorce that lasted 8 years. Inside Brangelina's endless war. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were once Hollywood's ultimate golden couple, the kind of pair that dominated headlines, red carpets, and magazine covers. But when they finally called it quits in 2016, just 2 short years after their dreamy wedding in France, the breakup turned into one of the longest and messiest sagas Hollywood has ever seen. And even though the world thought they were watching a fairy tale, what really played out was a tangled web of heartbreak, legal warfare, accusations, and a bitter fight over everything from children to wine. This wasn't just a divorce. It became the War of the Roses. It all started with their French fairy tale. In 2014, after nearly a decade together, Brad and Angelina tied the knot at their beloved Chateau Miraval, the sprawling vineyard they co-owned in the south of France. The ceremony was intimate, with their children playing a starring role, and Angelina wore a Versace dress with a veil decorated by doodles drawn by the kids themselves. To the outside world, it seemed like the final touch on a love story everyone had been watching unfold since their sizzling chemistry lit up the screen in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Brad described married life as feeling different in the best way, while Angelina admitted it felt nice to finally be husband and wife. But within 2 years, that picture-perfect dream would collapse. In September 2016, Angelina filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Suddenly, one of Hollywood's most glamorous marriages was over, and the world wanted to know why. Then the bombshell dropped. The FBI and the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services were investigating Brad for alleged child abuse after an incident on the family's private jet. Details were murky, but the story was that Brad had been drinking, tensions were high, and when one of the kids, reportedly Maddox, stepped in during a fight between his parents, Brad lost his temper. Sources close to him insisted it had been an argument that escalated more than it should have, while those on Angelina's side painted a darker picture. In the end, no charges were filed, but the damage was already done. The fairy tale was shattered. Brad never directly addressed the allegations, but he did admit in a candid interview that he had been drinking too much. He confessed that he couldn't remember a day since college when he hadn't been smoking weed or drinking, and that he had been running from feelings. He admitted that even after he started a family, he held on to booze, and it eventually became a problem. After the plane incident, he quit everything cold turkey. No more alcohol, no more weed. He wanted to evolve instead of deny his problems. For Angelina, the decision to leave was about protecting her children. She later said she had made the right decision for the well-being of her family, and that her focus would always remain on their healing. But what followed was less healing and more all-out war. The divorce dragged on for years, 8 of them to be exact, and every new chapter was messier than the last. Custody of their 6 children became a battlefield. In the early years, Angelina accused Brad of not providing meaningful financial support, while he countered that he had loaned her millions, including $8 million for a house and over $1 million more for bills. By 2020, custody proceedings began in Los Angeles. Maddox, being over 18, was no longer part of the dispute, but the 5 younger children, Pax, Zahara, Shiloh, and twins Vivian and Knox, were caught in the middle. Eventually, Brad was granted joint custody, a ruling based on extensive testimony from professionals close to the children. But the fight was far from over. The split wasn't just about custody, there was also Chateau Miraval, the $60 million French vineyard they had bought together. What once symbolized their love turned into a war zone of legal filings. Brad accused Angelina of intentionally harming him by selling her stake in the vineyard to a company linked to Russian billionaire Yuri Shefler without his consent, despite their alleged agreement to never sell without the other's approval. He claimed that he had been the one who turned Miraval into a globally respected producer of rosé wine, while Angelina, in his view, had contributed nothing to its success. Her team shot back, accusing Brad of acting like a petulant child and wasting company assets on vanity projects like pool renovations and building a recording studio. They said he was more interested in Hollywood illusions than dirt and grapes. And just when it seemed the vineyard fight couldn't get uglier, another layer was added. A Vanity Fair article alleged that Brad had tried to pressure Angelina into signing a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for selling her share, which would have barred her from speaking about the infamous 2016 plane incident. Brad's team insisted the NDA was only about protecting the value of the winery, while Angelina's camp painted it as another example of control. The magazine even quoted insiders who claimed Brad had been drinking heavily during the plane altercation, though others said he immediately regretted his behavior and sought help. Either way, Miraval was no longer a symbol of love. It became the most expensive battleground in their war. The back and forth dragged on for years, with Brad and Angelina shuffling through high-powered divorce lawyers like chess pieces. Angelina initially worked with Laura Wasser, the queen of celebrity divorces, before switching to Samantha Blais-Dejean, who specialized in child protection. Brad relied on Lance Spiegel early on, but later shifted to Anne C. Kiley, who became his main legal voice. Kiley insisted that Brad had owned up to everything he was responsible for, but would never take blame for things he hadn't done. Even subpoenas turned dramatic. Angelina's team allegedly tried to serve Brad at the SAG Awards, only to find he wasn't there. Meanwhile, the public watched as the couple who once couldn't keep their hands off each other on red carpets now couldn't stand to be in the same room. Angelina, usually private, admitted in interviews that she had made her decision for her children, and that silence had allowed lies to spread about her family. She described her 6 kids as brave and strong, navigating the media storm with resilience. Brad, on the other hand, opened up about his struggles, talking about sobriety, therapy, and finding peace. But peace was not something the divorce proceedings offered. By 2023, the bitterness was at an all-time high. Angelina's team accused Brad of being more invested in flashy renovations than in winemaking, while Brad's side accused her of selling to someone she knew would complicate his business just to spite him. Their vineyard, once the backdrop of their wedding, became a symbol of everything broken between them. To make matters worse, some of their children began dropping Brad's surname. Shiloh and Vivienne both removed Pitt from their names, a quiet but powerful statement that spoke louder than any press release. Then, finally, in December 2024, after years of headlines, millions in legal fees, and endless mudslinging, the divorce was settled. The War of the Roses was over. The Brangelina dream was officially dead. Brad seemed to move on publicly, showing up at events with his new girlfriend, jewelry executive Inés de Ramón. Angelina, as always, kept her private life mostly guarded, but the scars of their breakup were impossible to ignore. From Hollywood's most adored couple to embittered exes locked in a near-decade-long war, their story had gone from a fairy tale to a cautionary tale. And perhaps the most shocking twist came not in court filings, but in Brad's own words. In a GQ interview, he was asked if he felt relief when the divorce was finalized. His response? He didn't think it was that major of a thing. To him, it was just something coming to fruition, legally speaking. He even added that he felt warm and secure with his friends, his loves, and his family. After everything, after the accusations, the investigations, the court battles, and the Vineyard War, Brad brushed it off as not that big of a deal. For the world, it had been a spectacle. For him, apparently, just another chapter. So, how did we get here? From the electric spark on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith to a wedding in France, from the glamour of the red carpet to FBI investigations, custody battles, and vineyard wars, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie lived out one of the most dramatic Hollywood love stories ever told. It had passion, betrayal, scandal, and heartbreak. It had love and loss, endings and new beginnings. But above all, it had two people who once seemed inseparable, only to become bitter enemies across a courtroom. And now, after nearly a decade, the curtain has finally closed on Brangelina. But as one story ended, another was only beginning. Brad Pitt's son just broke his silence and shocked everyone. Brad Pitt has lived most of his life under a microscope. From Hollywood blockbusters to his messy split with Angelina Jolie, the world has seen it all, or at least, that's what we thought. Because while everyone's been talking about Brad, his kids have mostly stayed silent. Until now. One of his sons finally broke that silence, and what he revealed left people stunned. And just as Angelina Jolie marked her 50th birthday, the spotlight shifted once again. Not on red carpets or movie roles, but on the complex family dynamics playing out behind the scenes. Reports surfaced claiming Brad had virtually no contact with the 6 children he shares with Angelina. To outsiders, the idea seemed shocking. But in reality, parent-child estrangement isn't unique to Hollywood. It's something that happens in countless families around the world. If it can tear apart everyday households, why would the Pitt-Jolie family be any different? The silence around the Jolie-Pitt kids shattered when resurfaced comments from Pax, one of their sons, began making headlines. Back in 2020, Brad had just won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. During his acceptance speech, he referenced his children, dedicating the moment to them by saying, "This is for my kids, who color everything I do. I adore you." But the speech didn't sit well with Pax. That same year on Father's Day, he reportedly posted a private Instagram story where he described Brad as a world-class a-hole and an awful human being. He accused his father of lacking empathy and claimed he had filled their lives with fear. The post ended with a brutal line, "Happy Father's Day, you f***ing awful human being." Those words, though written years ago, resurfaced later and sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Brad never publicly addressed his son's outburst, and legally, he had already been cleared of all allegations of abuse. Still, the fallout left its mark, pushing him to quietly reshape his public image. He leaned into a wellness journey that painted him as a man seeking peace. He launched a cashmere company, introduced a gender-fluid skincare line, explored sobriety, and even began sculpting. He looked like someone trying to rebuild himself from the ashes of a broken marriage and a fractured family. Meanwhile, Angelina spoke in her own way. In a 2023 interview with Vogue, she admitted her children had saved her. They taught her how to exist in the world differently, pulling her through years she described as deeply painful. But the wounds between them didn't heal. In April 2024, the divorce battle reignited in court over Chateau Miraval, their French winery. Jolie alleged that Brad had been abusive even before the infamous 2016 plane incident, claiming that was the first time he turned his aggression toward the children as well. She said she left immediately after that flight. Her legal team also alleged that Brad had tried to silence her with a restrictive NDA, refusing to let her sell her share of the winery to him unless she agreed to terms they argued were designed to bury the truth. They accused him of trying to contractually bind her to silence about his personal misconduct, whether related to Miraval or not. Brad's side pushed back, dismissing these claims as a distraction, accusing Angelina's team of introducing misleading or irrelevant information whenever a decision didn't go their way. But Angelina's lawyer countered, saying she never pressed charges because she believed it was better for the family if Brad took responsibility and helped them recover from the trauma. Instead, she claimed, Brad chose to bury the truth. Her legal team argued that his lawsuit over the winery had dragged private evidence into the spotlight, and now the question was whether that evidence would see the light of day. As all of this played out, the children quietly began making their own statements, not with words, but with names. In 2024, Shiloh, on her 18th birthday, filed to legally drop Pitt from her surname, becoming simply Shiloh Jolie. Around the same time, Vivian's name appeared as Vivian Jolie in a playbill for a musical she worked on, though it wasn't clear if hers was a legal change. Earlier, Zahara had introduced herself at Spelman College as Zahara Marley Jolie. Maddox, too, was reported to have stopped using his father's last name, though without filing legal paperwork. It was as if, one by one, the children were drawing a line, publicly and symbolically distancing themselves. For Brad, this was devastating. A source close to him revealed that he was aware and upset about Shiloh's decision. He had never felt more joy than when she was born, and losing that connection left him shattered. He loved his children and missed them deeply, and the reminders of that loss were painful. The heartbreak was compounded by earlier custody battles, where Brad was accused of preventing Shiloh from testifying about her preferences. At 14, she had reportedly wanted to speak up during a 2021 custody hearing, but Brad's legal team blocked her from the stand. The judge ultimately sided with him, meaning Shiloh's voice went unheard in court. Years later, when she dropped his name, it felt like her delayed testimony finally arrived, not in words, but in action. By the summer of 2024, the tension between Brad and Angelina reached a strange kind of stalemate. They both appeared at the Venice Film Festival, though days apart, each promoting their own projects. Angelina presented her Oscar-tipped opera film, Maria, and was spotted with her friend Akela, which sparked short-lived romance rumors quickly dismissed when it became clear his partner was also there. Then came the real headline. Brad stepped out arm in arm on the red carpet with Inez de Ramon, a jewelry executive almost 30 years his junior. They smiled for cameras alongside George and Amal Clooney, showing the world a very different picture from the one painted by years of court filings and family drama. But the real turning point came at the end of that year. On December 30th, 2024, it was revealed that Brad and Angelina had finally reached a divorce settlement, 8 years after they first announced their split. Angelina's legal team confirmed she was exhausted, but relieved, saying she had always focused on finding peace and healing for her family. The terms of the agreement were sealed, but the announcement marked the end of a chapter that had consumed nearly a decade of both their lives. From the electric beginnings on a movie set to the heartbreaking estrangement of children, the Brangelina saga had everything: glamour, scandal, love, betrayal, and loss. It was a Hollywood story that played out in courtrooms and headlines, in whispers and Instagram posts, in name changes and silence. And now, with the divorce finally settled, the love story that once captivated the world has ended not with reconciliation, but with separation, bitterness, and the quiet unraveling of a family once thought unbreakable. What do you think about what Brad's son said? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.